Hello, and welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss mystical works of literature and how they relate to recovery. We hope you enjoy today's podcast episode.
Hello, this is Buddy C. Welcome to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. Today we have Brian and Drew and Oscar. Good to have you guys. We'll be discussing the 78th verse of the Tao Te Ching and how it relates to our recovery. If you're new to the podcast, we talk about mostly Taoist works and how they relate and resonate with our, I say understanding loosely, our understanding of the higher power. It's really more of our knowing of the higher power, isn't it, than our understanding? So it could be the Tao of our knowing. That would probably be more appropriate, right? What I find in recovery is that it's not about earning or achieving. It's about knowing. It's about relationship. Brian, if I want to get to know you, I can read about you. I can, find out something about your business if I want to. But if I want to get to know you, I need to spend time with you. Right? That's it. Now, I was raised in a Christianity that stressed serving God, really walking what you were told in a sincere way. And how that's translated over to my recovery is that I get to know the higher power, or get to know or be able to walk this way of life not by studying, not by earning, but by doing, by loving, by walking in compassion. Because if God is love, as we understand God as being love, then when we serve, when I learn to look out for you and think about your needs, I am actually experiencing God at that point. And that's what we talk about here, is how, and it's amazing, a text 2,500 years old, how it can relate to our everyday life. And I just feel it's a gift, an incredible gift that we get to experience. The one benefit I want to talk about this week, if you go to buddyc.org, there's a daily devotion that you can sign up for that's free. I'm taking a lot of these phrases that we use and making a daily devotion out of those. So if you would like to receive that, you're welcome to go to buddyc.org and sign up. There's no promotion in that. There's nothing of that kind. That list is not sold to anyone. Nothing of that sort. Take advantage of that. If this speaks to you, you may want to do that. Okay, the 78th verse of the Tao Te Ching. Let's start with Stephen Mitchell. Drew, if you'd read that for us, please.
Sure. Nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and flexible, nothing can surpass it. The soft overcomes the hard. The gentle overcomes the rigid. Everyone knows this is true, but few can put it into practice. Therefore, the master remains serene in the midst of sorrow. Evil cannot enter his heart. Because he has given up helping, he is people's greatest help. True words seem paradoxical.
Thank you, Drew. Oscar, you want to read Jonathan Starr for us?
Yes, I'd like to. Nothing in this world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for attacking the hard and strong, none can triumph so easily. It is weak, yet none can equal it. It is soft, yet none can damage it. It is yielding, yet none can wear it away. Everyone knows that the soft overcomes the hard, and the yielding triumphs over the rigid. Why then so little faith? Why can no one practice it? So the sages say, Fulfill even the lowest position. Love even the weakest creature. Then you will be called Lord of every offering, King of all below heaven. Thanks.
Thank you, Oscar. Brian, you have the Derek Lynn for us?
Yeah, sure. Nothing in the world is softer or weaker than water, yet nothing is better at overcoming the hard and strong. This is because nothing can replace it. That the weak overcomes the strong, and the soft overcomes the hard. Everybody in the world knows, but cannot put into practice. Therefore, sages say, the one who accepts the humiliation of the state is called its master. The one who accepts the misfortune of the state becomes king of the world. The truth seems like the opposite.
Thank you, Brian. I'm going to read my interpretation for verse 78. I think it applies here. Exerting powerlessness. In the world, nothing is more yielding than water. Yet, for attacking that which is hard and unyielding, there's nothing better. There is no substitute. Use weakness to overcome strength. Use submissiveness to overcome forcefulness. In the world, no one has this knowledge. So the sage exerts powerlessness to meet any challenge, knowing she has unlimited strength, not her own. I like that one. Exerting powerlessness. That's the paradox, right? Are you guys familiar with the 4 paradoxes from AA?
No,
Oh, you're not?
no,
Really?
no.
Okay. Good. I was heading in that direction. I'm for sure heading there now. I thought everyone knew about those. It's from actually the 3rd edition, Oscar, if I remember correctly, 2nd or 3rd, or maybe both, but it was not in the 4th edition. It's a story. It's called The Professor and the Paradoxes. And here's the actual paradoxes themselves. And these came from the story. The first paradox is that we surrender to win. On the face of it, surrendering certainly does not seem like winning, but it is in AA. Only after we have come to the end of our rope, hit a stone wall in some aspect of our lives beyond which we can go no further, only when we hit bottom in despair and surrender can we accomplish sobriety, which we could never accomplish before. We must, and we do, surrender in order to win. There's a link to the paradoxes there if you guys need it. This is the same approach that we're talking about in this verse, I believe, because the verse itself is talking about really the paradox of how things really work, how we can exert powerlessness in our life. That phrase, exerting powerlessness, is even a paradoxical kind of phrase, right? Makes no sense. How, if you're exerting, how are you powerless? And the way that works for me is when I choose in a situation to not push as I want to, but maybe when I get in a situation, I find myself pushing. You know what I'm talking about? Like I want something to happen and I'm forcing and I'm getting ill and I'm doing that whole control thing. The first thing I have to do is take a step back and say, okay, what is it that this person, can I understand this person rather than me insisting on being understood? That's a step in that direction of behaving as water behaves, not fighting, not resisting, but yielding and taking that moment and more of noticing the situation rather than accomplishing an agenda. When I start looking at things that way, I can see situations clearer. It's like the last phrase of 78 in the Mitchell. because he's given up helping his people's greatest help. Another way you could say that is he's given up trying to make people behave the way he wants them to behave. He is their greatest help, maybe. Some way that the selfish agenda, personal agenda, has been dropped. It's back to that, how can I help you instead of how can I make you help me? Drew?
Yeah, that reminds me of when I stopped drinking years ago. Excuse me. And I I'd talk about it. I'd talk about it with people, but then I just stopped talking about it. I think enough time had gone by. It was just kind of part of my life. And people who gave me a hard time for not drinking, telling me they didn't trust somebody who doesn't drink, that sort of thing, making fun of me, putting me down. I could tell people who do that, they have a little bit of they don't have the best relationship with alcohol if they're doing that sort of thing. And those are people who I would want to help, but I didn't say anything to them. Instead, I just kept living my life. And slowly, one by one, a few of them came up to me and told me that they admired how I could go to a party or hang out with them all weekend and not drink. They were curious about that. And they wanted to know if they could do that. They were afraid of other people treating them the way they'd been treating me if they chose not to drink. By me not trying to help them, by not talking to them about, hey, I think you might have a problem, or hey, have you tried not drinking? By not helping, by just living my life, that was my way of helping them, by showing them you can live your life this way. But it wasn't me consciously thinking, hey, if I don't drink, then I will be helping them. I will be showing them it's possible. I didn't try to help, and that was the way I helped them the most.
Thank you, Drew. There's something in that stopping the fight. There's a strength there that is unrecognizable. That's the paradox of this thing. Because I think at that point we can make the shift from depending on our own strength to letting go and allowing strength that's not our own. Oscar?
Yeah, I hear a lot of paradoxes in. Now, I didn't know there were four, but even a sober addict is a paradox, right? Or a sober alcoholic. It's what's that? A sober alcoholic. They exist. Wonderful. And stop fighting is maybe the biggest one, yes. Because by stop fighting, when I stop fighting and I live in complete acceptance and surrender, I'm invulnerable. So by not fighting, I get invulnerable. It's also a huge paradox. Yeah. And I thought, oh, surrender is a thing that only can be done in the moment. It can't be done. I can't surrender in my head. I can't think surrendering. I can think about it and theorize about it, of course, but that's not the act of surrendering. The act of surrendering can only happen in the present moment at any time. So I surrender to the moment, right? Whatever it is, whatever it brings me, whatever life unfolds or the world unfolds, I surrender to it, I accept it, I'm thankful for it, grateful, and in the best case, I love it. So you go up the grades or the levels from acceptance, surrender, acceptance, gratefulness, appreciation, love. And as a matter of fact, that's all one thing. Only, yeah, you can feel a bit more this way or a bit more that way. But I think it's one thing. And then I experienced the harmony with the Tao, or the unity with God, or the contact, the conscious contact with God, where you talked about in the beginning. So when I surrender to the present moment, I start the conversation with God.
That's compassionate living, isn't it, Oscar?
That's what, sorry?
Compassionate living.
Passionate living.
Compassionate living. Yes.
Compassionate. Yeah, definitely. It's without self. So there is no personal agenda possible in this because there's no person. So if there's no person, then there's no agenda too. And the other way around too. When there's no personal agenda, then there's no person. Because what would a person do there if there is no agenda?
Yeah. And that's very much what happens, isn't it? We have a situation, the way that we used to have handled that has changed. Even if it's a situation that I've been wronged, if I can still have compassion for the person that's trying to wrong me, because the relief I get has nothing to do with them. This is a way of living that keeps me at a level of peace and joy. It's not about them. Viktor Frankl found that out in the concentration camps. What's the name of his book? Man's Search for Meaning, I think. Very good book. I would definitely recommend it. He noticed in the concentration camps that the people who survived were those that were sharing what they had. Good book. It'd make a good read. Back to these paradoxes, they're all showing us how to behave like water behaves. That's a great thing about the Tao Te Ching, being it's 2,500 years old. It's going to use mostly examples of nature or examples of things they had, like we talked about. Was it last week we talked about the bow, I think? And that was a really good, I listened to that again and got some really good stuff out of it. That was a really good episode. But this is another way of each of these is telling us how to behave like water. And it's telling us the paradox and the result of us really learning how to live a surrendered life. Brian?
Yeah, I was reading this first comment here. It says, in my version, it says, water appears to be the weakest and softest thing in the world. It always conforms to the shape of its container. Pour it into a bottle, it's a bottle. Pour it into a cup, it's a cup. Water is the ultimate symbol, the yielding and flexible aspect of the Tao.
The last thing I want to do is be formed by something else.
That's it.
I do not want to be influenced or controlled. I have a cousin that teaches special needs children, and I really admire her for that. And I asked her, how does she handle those situations where the child may not understand or not want to do what you're asking? She said, we get behind them, put our hands on their hands, and make them do it. And I immediately thought of myself. I'm like, oh, how often it happens to me less now, but it still happens. I do not want to do, and I find myself full. And it's easier if I just go, if I just stop the fighting, just stop it.
Have you tried that with a sponsee?
No, I let suffering do that for the sponsee.
Yeah.
I let suffering do it. I'll make a suggestion and suffer until they realize they've got to give up the fight.
Mm-hmm. My youngest son, who's in college, there's a couple of things that as parents we're in some fear around, and it's nothing major, but it's just something that's just not going to work out. And he can be a little hard-headed like his daddy. It's one of those things that I just have to remind myself that he has his own higher power, And all we can do is make a suggestion, and we have to let him figure it out. And one of them is simple. It was just contacting somebody about an internship. I asked him yesterday, I said, did you get in touch with this person? He said, no, I didn't. I said, well, did you call him? Yeah, I called him. I said, have you left him a voicemail or sent him an email? No. And I knew that was where I needed to just pump the brakes and let it go and hand it over to mama.
Yeah.
Who's gentler and softer.
That's the things we learn in recovery, Brian, is how to start being more well-rounded in the rest of our life.
Yeah. And remind myself that this doesn't have to be solved today.
No.
Or even tomorrow.
I would want it to be. I would love for it to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Dig in, and we're going to resolve this right now.
That's right.
Yeah.
I've got my checklist of things we need to do to resolve this, and we're going to do every one of them in order. Let's read the rest of these paradoxes and see how they relate, and then they all relate to this. They all relate to this verse. Number 2, we give away to keep. I'll put this link in the show notes too, by the way, for anyone listening. We give away to keep. That seems absurd and untrue. How can you keep anything if you give it away? But in order to keep whatever it is we get in AA, we must go about giving it away to others for no fees or rewards of any kind. When we cannot afford to give away what we have received so freely in AA, we had better get ready for our next draw. It will happen every time. We've got to continue to give it away in order to keep it. 3, we suffer to get well. There's no way to escape the terrible suffering of remorse and regret and shame and embarrassment which starts us on the road to getting well from our affliction. There's no new way to shake out a hangover. It's painful and for us necessarily. I told this to a friend of mine as he sat weaving to and fro on the side of the bed in terrible shape. I said, Lost John, that's his nickname, Lost John. You're going to have to do a certain amount of shaking sooner or later. He said, for God's sake, let's make that later. We suffer to get well. 4, we die to live. That's a beautiful paradox straight out of the biblical idea of being born again or losing one's life to find it. When we work at our 12 steps, the old life of guzzling and fuzzy thinking and all that goes with it gradually dies, and we acquire a different and better way of life. As our shortcomings are removed, one life of us dies and another life of us lives. And we in AA die to live. Any comments on those, guys? Oscar?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you for this because I didn't know it and I really like them a lot. And giving is receiving is the same as giving away the key, right? Giving and receiving is the same in the spiritual world or the spiritual realm. Giving and receiving are different than from the material realm. When I have something and I give it away, I don't have it anymore. But in the spiritual realm, in AA or CA, where I have my fellowship, when we give away, it becomes more. That's it. Because the other one sometimes is able to receive it, but it's not gone from me. So then you have 2 instead of 1. And so it continues, and that's really beautiful. And for me, it was a huge insight that giving and receiving is the same thing. It's really beautiful, a beautiful paradox. And I also suffer to get well. I recognize it as okay, when I look at my life, I really suffered from my own living. So I'm really aware that I was the problem. But there was a lot of suffering, definitely. And now when I'm here, and this morning I had Sponsi here, and we talked, and I realized there's no other way that I would have been here with this man than by the suffering. So also that one I recognize a lot. And then the last one, die to live, I recognize as the death of the ego, or the death of the personal agenda, or the death of the person. And when the person is dead, then I'm just a channel for peace, right? Just love and trying to help and compassionful. So very recognizable and very nice to get them in this article or whatever it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Oscar. Yeah, this is from the story "The Professor and the Paradoxes." And if you get an older edition, I actually, if you go on YouTube, you can Google. You should be able to Google "Professor and Paradoxes" and hear the guy's story talking about this. And this is one of the most quoted in our area. The paradoxes are talked about. Many groups have them printed off and are maybe not part of the reading. Sometimes they make it part of the readings and meetings even, but it was dropped from the 4th edition for whatever reason his story was. But it's one of the most quoted portions of a story in AA. Drew?
Yeah, I think one paradox from Tao Te Ching that just kind of permeates the whole book that relates to recovery for me is that the only thing that doesn't change is that everything changes. That's the only thing that's permanent. This bad feeling that I have, this bad day that I had, that's not going to last forever. I don't need to use anything to make it go away. And similarly, this good feeling that I have, this good thing that happened to me, it's not meant to last forever. And I don't need to use anything to try to make it stick around for longer than it's supposed to. So that's just the one change, the one paradox that helps me is recognizing that nothing is going to stick around forever and nothing is meant to stick around forever. So it's not my job to interfere with that.
Thank you, Drew. I still suffer now. I only change when I suffer, unfortunately. Now, sometimes I can suffer less and change. Sometimes I can just lose a little bit of my peace and make a change and not have things go so far out of kilter that they're about to explode. Oh, maybe I need to do something different.
If you're willing to let go.
Yeah, I'm willing to. I guess I'm not as tied as I was to life and the outcomes that I want or expect, maybe. I've had one realization about the letting go lately. It's that my problem is not letting go. My problem is, why am I holding on to begin with? Let's take it back a step. Why is it that I am having difficult? What is it I'm wanting to hold on to that's causing me not to let go? So if I can get back a step, I don't have to get to the point to where I'm having difficulty letting go, if that makes sense. I actually came across that with a sponsee of mine, Scotty M, that comes to this meeting some. We talked about it in a verse of the Wensa. This comes from the first verse of the Tao Te Ching. It's a note. Actually, it's the second verse. Losing something is the result of possessing something. How can people lose what they don't possess? If I don't possess it to begin with, I don't have to lose it. That's just way too simple, isn't
Yeah.
it? Oscar?
Yeah, I think you get there one way or the other way. So if I have some kind of resentment or something where I think, okay, I have to let this go. And then I realize, okay, but why? Because I can't let it go, or something I think I can't let it go. Why am I keeping it here? It will always be fear or guilt, probably. So then I have to let go of the fear or the guilt So then I come to the bigger ones to let go, but still, then you have to let go. And at a certain moment, you're at the bottom or something, I think, or at the core of it, and then you have to let go that one. And why would I be holding on to that core one? Is really an intellectual question. I'm afraid.
Do you know this is a thing? We continue to have to let go. If we'll just deal with that fear that pops up in our fourth step, really identify it and start surrendering it, we don't have to continue to let go because we're not going to hold on.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the whole point, right? Is to remove those fears, those reasons that we, and ultimately for me, the reason I drank was to escape from those fears, escape from the moment. Brian?
Y'all familiar with the book Drop the Rock? That's what I was thinking about. Drop the Rock. It's on step 6 and 7, removing character defects. It's a pretty good book.
I really like it. I just bought it recently, and I'm reading every day. I'm reading one of the stories that's in there. It's a really nice. It's really about letting go.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely about letting go. Yeah.
And like Buddy said, the letting go, it's going to happen one way or another. Or was that you? I don't.
Letting go is going to happen regardless. Either we can go kicking and screaming, or
we can go peaceful. I can either go walking alongside it, or I can go getting drugged or dragged, however it is.
yeah, remind you of the officer, you're getting in the car one way or the other. Which is it going to be is up to you, you know.
Head first or feet first.
That's right. Where does all that start? We talk about all these paradoxes. We're talking about not helping. All this water analogy sounds good, but how do we do it? How do we start the process? That's the real question. For me, I can just speak for myself. I had to get to the point where I stopped the fight. First, I have to stop fighting. That's the surrender aspect for me. I have to lay down all of my weapons and just stop. And then once I stop, then I can start allowing recovery to work in my life, not will my way into it working. But I don't understand it. But the moment I stopped fighting, I remember when it was, I got to the point that I said, this is not working. Recovery's not working. I'd been at it for 5 years. I was still drinking occasionally. I couldn't stay sober. I wanted to kill myself. I was miserable. I was the worst, the more miserable than I had been the entire time. And I finally said, this is stopping. Either this is going to work or I will find a way out of here. I am not going to continue living like this. And that was that moment of surrender. And I finally just said, alcohol is not an option for me. I can't do this anymore. And that was my moment of surrender. And it just lifted immediately, just started lifting. And I haven't really had that I recall a real craving to drink alcohol since. And I thought at that moment, could it be this easy? I remember thinking that, is this all I had to do was stop fighting? Brian?
I was thinking about that guy on the podcast. I think it's the owl.
Boiled owl?
That says, I'm recovering just as hard as I can. And of course, he's joking, but I'm like, that's it.
I'm trying just as hard as I can to let go. I'm trying just as hard as. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the paradox. Is that how do we learn to step out of the way? And that's really for me, it's a substitute in that instead of me focusing on me, all these people are put in my life that I can help them. I can focus on them. And I get my thinking off of me. That really is a huge help for me because If I'm focusing on how I can help you, then I'm not thinking about me. I'm not obsessing over me. We all have our moment of surrender. We all have the point that we gave up. And I believe, I know I saw such a relief when I gave up, when I quit fighting. And with time, I thought, how can I stop fighting all these other things? How can I stop fighting in relationships with my kids, with my businesses, all those things? Stop fighting traffic. How can I stop fighting all these little things that gnaw at me? Because it's all the same process, right? We stop the fight and we can apply those same tools that keep us sober to the rest of our life. That's what the 12 steps about. Practicing these principles in more of our affairs. It says all, but for me, it's more. I don't think I'm to all yet, but more, yes, for sure.
Then you have that moment where you can look back and you're like, thank God it didn't work out. You know, you ever had anything like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I have no idea what I need, Brian, or what I don't need.
Yeah.
If I got everything I desired, my life would be a lot more screwed up than it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What's that old country song? Thank God for unanswered prayer.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Because I only judge things on the past. That's part of the Course in Miracles right now, the daily lessons. I only see things as they were in the past. I don't see them in the present. I take a situation and I judge it by my fears, by the things I hold on to from the past. I may have some good things that I hold on to with that, but it's all the past that I'm judging something by.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of this is letting that go and approaching everything with an open heart, with an open mind, taking this present moment and instead of judging it by what I remember of the past, just accepting it as it is in this moment, which sounds very woo woo, but it's very practical. I had a meeting the other night. I'm chairing a couple of meetings here locally, and it's a small group, so we've decided to cut back on our meetings because of lack of attendance. I drove into town, it's 10 miles, for a meeting that I was chairing, and no one shows up. And it was 5 after, and I was going to give it till 10 after and leave. And someone walks through the door at 5 after. They were getting a paper signed. And I thought, okay, I got to hang out here for somebody who really doesn't want a meeting. They just want to get a paper. I was all my head over past experience with this, right? And so I found myself getting angry. And when they came in, I was ill. So I wanted to go home, and here they are. And I've got to sit here and do a meeting for somebody that doesn't want to be here. I was doing all that past stuff in my head. I said, wait a minute. Maybe they're not here just to get a paper, even though they're getting a paper signed. Maybe they're not here just to get a paper signed. Maybe they're really interested in recovery. So I tried to approach it from that and open my heart up to what was going on in that moment. And sure enough, they were interested in recovery. They weren't just interested in getting a paper signed, even though they needed it signed for the judge. We have that here for a lot of our meetings where the courts will require someone to go to a particular number of meetings. Do you have that, Oscar, in your part of the world?
I don't know. Not in this country.
Okay.
No, not as an
That's very big here. And we have some meetings who refuse to sign papers, say you need to be here because you want to be, not because you have to be. Especially closed meetings. I was a member of a meeting that refused to sign because that got rid of all the people who didn't want to be there, that were just there because they had to be. So a lot of debate about that. I won't get into that, but so I tried to look at this with a new perspective, with a fresh set of glasses, all those ways we say that. And sure enough, they were there for the right reason. We had a great meeting. It was very good. It was very helpful to them. And that just shows that when I enter situations thinking I know, I usually don't. It's usually a mistake when I bring the past into the present. Been a good discussion, guys. Anything to add? I'm glad we got to talk about the paradoxes. That fits perfectly with this water analogy. You guys have a great week. Hope to see you next week. Thank you.
Hello, this is Buddy C. I wanted to make you aware of several recovery-related resources that I've posted in the episode description. These resources include a list of recovery podcasts, a free sober meditation app, daily recovery email, shared Google Recovery calendars. Hope you put some of these resources to use and have a great week.
Thank you for listening to the Tao of Our Understanding Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends in recovery.